I'm doing well, and I hope you are too.
By His grace, from well.
Okay. CONRAD has joined us to help us on the matter of the cocoa bills and the restructuring. In fact, we are learning a lot. Nowadays, you have to know everything from debt restructuring, debt exchange program, or because you bought some small this thing, you made some small investment. First of all, help us with some education before we take your comments on what you think is happening here. What are cocoa bills?
Thank you very much, Sana. So if I get your question in terms of what the cocoa bills are, these were effectively, I don't know whether the word bills and bonds are pretty much interchangeable. But basically, both types are types of debt. When you say debt, it's a situation where, let's say it's a government debt. And so let's say you are government, Sana, and you want to do something, you need money to do something. There are two ways you can do it. You can either collect taxes and do it. So let's say you want to increase cocoa production, you want to increase the amount you pay farmers, or you want to rehabilitate cocoa farms, and you need $1 million. You have got two options. You can either choose to go ahead and use the taxes that you collect on a day-to-day basis, or you can go and borrow. And so in borrowing, you can either just go to the commercial market and take a loan, like we have been doing in previous periods, the cocoa syndicated loans to go and buy cocoa, sell and pay back. Or you can issue what you call bonds or bills, where basically it's almost like a treasury bill, except that it's even more secure than a treasury bill. And all you do is you go to somebody and say, okay, you can, you have got 1 billion available. 10 people choose to come and buy each at 100 million. So you agree the interest rate upfront, and you have what you call your quarterly interest rates or coupon payments. That's the term you use for bonds and that kind of debt. So every quarter, so if it's a 5-year bond, you give me your money for 5 years. Every quarter or every 3 months, I pay you a portion of the interest, and at the end of the 5 years, I give you back your money. So that's in simple terms. And so all it simply means is that government of Ghana, if you recall, sometime in 2019 thereabouts, issued bonds. I think almost $2 billion worth of bonds, and they issued it at about 32% interest, almost 32.3 or so percent interest. So what it meant was that every period, I mean, it's 32% per annum. So if you had given them, say, 100,000 Ghana, you had bought 100,000 Ghana worth of those bills or cocoa bills, then basically your interest for each year will be about 32,000 Ghana. They'll divide it by 4. So every quarter, they'll give you a share of it, which is 8,000 Ghana in quarter 1, 8,000 Ghana in quarter 2, 8,000 Ghana in quarter 3, and 8,000 Ghana in quarter 4. They'll do that every year until the end of the bond period, and then they'll return your money to you. So that is what government of Ghana did. Government of Ghana decided to move away from the standard approach where Cocobod only goes for a temporary loan, a syndicated loan, to buy cocoa beans in the season and then sell them in the market, make their profit, pay the money back to the guys. They decided that they rather wanted to have a long-term debt. So they went and took a very long-term bond, which the Ghanaians subscribed to. Now, interestingly, as you know, this is the same cocoa bills that were due somewhere around January, February, and the bonds, the interest was paid into customers' accounts, and then the very next day it was withdrawn. And if you remember at the time, some investors started complaining, why did the money hit my account and get reversed? And then suddenly they were told the Bank of Ghana had instructed their banks to reverse that money and to, if you like, plow it in automatically for another 6 months. So they were supposed to have received that money 6 months ago, somewhere around February, and they were giving the money and automatically taking back and reinvested without their permission for another 6 months. So that's the context of the specific cocoa bills we are talking about at present, Senna.
And there's a debt exchange program. In fact, we've heard that terminology before, But what's your understanding of what they are doing with it this time around? Because first, you're supposed to get your interest. You did not get it in January. They took it back. Now they're asking you to do what they call an exchange. From what you're reading, what's your understanding of what they're trying to do?
So it's a very interesting scenario, Sana, where I mean we look at the fact that they were supposed to pay, they didn't pay, and now they've done kick this into the long grass. So you take the scenario: people had bonds that were basically, if you like, bonds that were due in February. They were paid the money, right? And unfortunately, that money was reversed. Money that belongs to them, right? But that money was instantly reversed. And they were then told that, oh, it will be reinvested for you. So instead of getting your money, and I'll put some numbers to it shortly so that you can see how it all looks. They were told that that money would then be made available to you in 6 months, right? Now, 6 months down the lane, they are waiting for their money, right? And this time around, they are told that we want to do as a domestic exchange program. So effectively, when they were due to collect that money in February, that money was flushed into their accounts and taken back. Now, many of them complained because they had plans for the money. And the reason many people actually invested in cocoa bills is because cocoa bills were marketed as even being more secure than treasury bills. So the most secure of all secure investments in government securities or government debt, as we always call them. So nobody believed that I'll give my money to government and not get it back, because government hasn't gone bankrupt. But then in February, they were told automatically the money hit your account. Initially, they were complaining they don't get it. Then the money hit their account and was reversed immediately. They were now supposed to get it in July. Come July, you are now told that, oh, we have to put this into a debt exchange program. So if you look at it from that simple perspective, government has destroyed confidence in itself. Now, anybody who has gone through this experience, Senna, why will you go and buy treasury bills or cocoa bills or any government securities in the future if you know that government will take your money? When it's time to pay, they'll put it in your account and take it back out of the account again, right? And then tell you that, oh, don't worry, we'll pay you in 6 months. And then when it gets to 6 months, they will then say, we don't have the money to pay you. We are now going to move this money so that you will not receive it till 2028. We're in 2023. And now the money was kicked down a 6-month lane. Now it's been kicked down a 5-year lane. So if you had your small 100,000 Ghana you put in there and you are collecting the interest to buy your medication, and bear in mind, most of the people doing these investments are not Dangotes. They are people who have taken their pensions and they are looking for the best returns because inflation is high. Because even with inflation being at about 54%, 52% as of last year, that 33% interest on that cocoa bills meant that you were still technically losing about 20% of your money. Now, government is saying even that money that you were losing part of, you are not going to get it now until 5 years. But if you look at some of the numbers, it's not just kicking it down. The domestic exchange program, what they have said is they are reducing the interest rate from 32% down to 13%. Some people say 12%, some say 2%, depending on where you go to. It looks like it's between 12 and 13%. So, Senna, here you are in a scenario where, and I'm quantifying this, it's almost 7.9 billion Ghana cedis. That's roughly 8 billion, right? And what they are saying, the first part of this debt exchange program is that we're going to reduce the interest that you and I agreed. You signed a contract that you give me your money and I will pay you 32% interest. Now, I am going to reduce that 32% down to 12%. So the first part is that all investors who go on this program will lose 20% of the interest that they had. You see, so that is the first part. Now, on top of losing that 20%, Senna, you will not get your money until 2028. So your money is being kicked down the lane till 2028. Now, I say 2028 because they broke it down. So they'll take your money and they'll divide it by 5. You get a little bit of it next year, a little bit of the interest next year, then a little bit the following year, then a little bit the following year, until 2028 is when you finally get all your money. It is money that was due to be given to you in February. It was kicked down the lane 6 months. 6 months later, the interest has been reduced from 32% to 12%. Now, what does that mean? When people say that the value of your money is the same, it's not true, Sana. If, assume that, Sana, you were the one who invested the full 8 billion in there. If you calculate 32%, right, of the 8 billion, you are looking at something of about 2.5 billion as the interest that you should have received. So if in total you were receiving, if we keep it very simple, I don't want to go into compound interest and all that stuff. Let's keep it simple. If you use your phone calculator and you work out 32% of 8 billion, you get about 2.5 billion. Government is now saying, let me do a debt exchange with you where I will reduce that interest from 32% to 12%. Sana, if you work out 12% of 8 billion, you get something of about 1 billion, so 1.04 billion. So if you check the difference is what? 1.5 billion. So government is robbing people of 1.5 billion. So you went and bought a cocoa security, a cocoa bill at 32% interest, meaning you were expecting to get 2.5 billion Ghana cedis interest. Government is saying, exchange it with me, and what I will do is I will take away 1.5 billion and you will only get 1 billion of that original 2.5 you were supposed to get. Sana, if this is not daylight robbery, what is it? On top of that, this 1.5 billion that I have taken out has now given you only 1 billion. I will not give you that 1 billion today. I will keep that 1 billion and give it to you in 2028. So in the first breath, 1.5 billion out of your 2.5 billion has been taken away. And in the second breath, that remaining 1 billion that is supposed to be yours, you are not going to get it now until another 5 years from today. So you lose on the face value straight away 60% of the interest. And on top of that interest, the 1 billion you're supposed to get, you won't get it for another 5 years. Now, if you simply look at how much you are foregoing, by the time you get to 5 years, it's less than zero. Even if you take a simple approach and say, look at what the rate of inflation is, the annual rate of inflation. At the moment, it's gone up to about 43% thereabouts, right? So if you assume that inflation is eating away at the value of your 1 billion every year, and you are not getting the interest on this, at the end of the first year, 420 million is out on that 1 billion. At the end of the second year, 840 million is gone. So by the end of the third year, your billion has been whittled away by what? The value of that billion has been whittled away by inflation. And this is just high-level simplistic view. If you put this into this, what you call future value calculations or discounting the value of this amount of 1 billion in 2028 backwards, you will find that you are back to zero. So this is effectively government's smart way of using financial engineering to literally take away all the money you have given them and pay you literally nothing back. The danger you are running here, this is making Ghanaians poorer. Why is it making Ghanaians poorer? We only just exchanged about 82 billion last year. This same approach was used. Interest was cut and people's monies were deferred to 2037. That took money out of their pockets. This particular round of cocoa debt in itself alone is 8 billion. It's roughly about $800 million. We are doing this, trying to take over almost $800 million out of the pockets of Ghanaians, just so that we can get what? 3 billion from the IMF. Sana, if you look at this whole domestic debt exchange program approach to financial stability, not only will it not work, it's creating a serious problem. Because from now onwards, when government goes to float cocoa bills, who is going to buy it again? Why will you go and buy a cocoa bill and say, oh, I'm expecting my money in 6 months? You get there to 6 months, they say, we'll extend it for another 6 months. We get to that 6 months, we say, we'll extend it for another 5 years. And how many of them will still be alive at this time? Most of these are pensioners, and they rely on these coupon bonds or interest for their medication and other living costs. So whichever way you look at this, Senna, what government has done, it is not good for government finances because it's going to create a crisis of trust in people's ability to buy. There are many people who are no longer buying treasury bills because they are concerned that the same thing could happen to them. When it comes to government bonds, there's a concern that the same thing has already happened and could happen to them. But the most important point is this: we can stabilize our finances by cutting expenditure, not by robbing Peter. What we are doing here is all the Peters who put their money into government cocoa bills, they are being robbed in daylight. And from a financial sense, from an economic sense, this is not good for Ghana because it's not going to make a difference. Now, the catch they put there is that it's voluntary. So we wait to see how many people in good conscience will go and take this voluntary deal. I personally will not take it because why would I sacrifice 2.5 billion only to get 1 billion? And that 1 billion is not going to be given to me till 5 years. Give me my 2.5 billion today plus the money that I have invested. If I'm an investor and I give you 8 billion and you are supposed to give me 2.5 billion today, I'll rather take that 2.5 billion today than tell you, okay, I'll sacrifice that 2.5 billion and only get 1 billion. And even with that 1 billion, you will not give it to me for another 5 years. So, Senna, I disagree with this. And I think that the danger we are going here is that even this will not be enough to solve our problems. Now they are thinking about going after pension funds, another haircut, and after pension funds, they are going to do another domestic debt round two. Meanwhile, we have our foreign debt. The next one is the US dollar denominated debt that is held in Ghana. I think there's about 1.3 billion of that they want to exchange as well. And then after that, you have our external creditors, another $13 billion dollars that they also have to find a way. The way I see this, Senna, the best thing is for government to stop splurging money and to start cutting back. We need to get into austerity in terms of severe cuts to the frivolous government expenditure that is the only way out of these particular difficult financial woes, Senna.
Okay, so ultimately, the question that is raised, because these cocoa bills are usually supposed to be coming from Cocobod, and Cocobod's only business is to buy cocoa and sell. Buy cocoa from the Ghanaian cocoa farmer and sell. And what does this then say about the Cocobod's current state? Because if you're only buying cocoa to go and sell, and you're taking these monies to enable you to buy that cocoa, is it to suggest that there's no more cocoa to buy? What is at least happening in Cocobod that has led us to this situation?
Thank you, Senna. And maybe I should have even started with that. You see, for a long time, all government, you match in financial speak, you match your short-term liabilities with short-term assets or your short-term obligations with short-term funding, right? You don't go and match a short-term funding need with long-term funding because that long-term funding will be sitting there. It's not being used. And then you are going to be paying for it because the longer you borrow, the more you pay. And this is the reason why many governments have done what you call short-term cocoa syndicated loans. We have a cocoa season. There's a particular harvest season. You don't go and take a loan from the beginning of the season and keep paying for it all the way till the harvest season. So what governments have always done is they wait till it is cocoa harvest season, then they go and take a loan, right? So if it's a 1 billion syndicated loan, then they use that to come and buy the cocoa from the farmers. Then they go and sell it. If they finish selling it in 1, 2, or 3 months, the money they have made, assume that they came and took a syndicated loan for 1 billion. They bought cocoa for 1 billion. They go and sell it for 2 billion. They come back and give that 1 billion to those banks within the 3-month or whatever short-term frame. Case closed. That is the smart way you do it because you have a short-term obligation. So you get short-term funding, right? It's almost like take an overdraft to quickly get over. If this particular month, I know that my finances won't balance by 500 cedis. I ask my bank for a short-term overdraft. I use that overdraft, I cover it. The next month they pay me, I return the overdraft, and I'm back to normal. You don't go and take a 5-year loan to cover off a 500 Ghana cedi shortage that you have for only 1 month. After that 1 month, the rest of the 4 years, 11 months, you'll be paying for something you don't need. And that is what Cocobod did. For the first time in our history, Cocobod borrowed almost 13 billion worth of debt. And in the name of we are going to use this to improve production, in the name of we are going to use this to provide inputs to farmers. Meanwhile, we weren't giving farmers the fertilizers. President Mahama was giving farmers fertilizers. We didn't go and take that kind of long-term loan. But what happened actually is that the finance minister of Uriata, after collateralizing all our other funds and had no more place to borrow, decided to use Cocobod to borrow. So even though Cocobod borrowed the money, it ended up in the finance minister's books and he has spent the money. So Cocobod no longer has that money. But remember, the danger we had there is that if you needed only 1 billion, then you use that 1 billion to go and buy $1 billion worth of cocoa. You go and sell it in the international markets. 3 months later, you get 1.5 billion. You come back and pay the banks. You are done. We went and took 13 billion. We can only produce 1.5 billion worth of cocoa every year. So that 13 billion we took, at the end of the year, we managed to raise 1.5 billion and we paid that off. There's still 11.5 billion sitting in our books. Unfortunately, if that 11.5 billion had been sitting with Cocobod, they could decide to pay it all back or invest it and be using that to pay back. Unfortunately, all of that 11 billion, the excess money they borrowed that they didn't need for that cocoa season, they gave it to government and government spent it. So when you come around to harvest season and you need money, guess what? They need more money. And so that is where we are. They decided to use Cocobod, just like they use ESLA fund, GET fund, road fund, all the other funds they borrowed against them. What they have now gone to do is for the next 10 plus years, our cocoa harvest and our cocoa money has already been pledged against this loan. So we are getting no more money from cocoa. So the profit we used to make from cocoa that helped government finances, government took all of that in 1 year and blew it. That 13 million has disappeared. And so now Cocobod does not have the money to pay that debt. And I think when they were doing this, my good friend, Honorable Adongo, had warned them that this will be covered as part of government debt. But they thought they were smart enough to say, oh, Cocobod will hold its own debt. But who owns Cocobod? Government of Ghana owns Cocobod 100%. And so in public finance, you will have to add it back to government debt, which is exactly what IMF has now done. IMF has added it back to our debt, which means that in reality, of course, we use them to collect the money and we chop that money. And so that is why we are in the quagmire we are. That money has been spent by central government. Now, that money is no longer available. So government had no choice then to subject that debt to the same level of domestic debt exchange program that it had used for its own. So this is how we got to the debt. It was simply a case of Ovoreta using Cocobod, collateralizing Cocobod's proceeds to borrow a huge amount of money that is now sitting on Cocobod. Cocobod can't pay, so we have to go into this arrangement of domestic debt exchange.
What happens in this case if the people who have subscribed to these bills then decide that we are not going to exchange it?
We'll be back to square one, Sana, because what's going to happen is, look, the truth of the matter is, whether they exchange or they don't exchange, government hasn't got money to pay. That is the reality. Now, if you remember, those who did the domestic debt exchange program, the first 82 billion, and it was concluded sometime late last year, they were supposed to receive their first coupons under the domestic debt exchange program in February. They didn't get it. They were supposed to receive the second one in May. They still did not get it. Now, we are yet to find out if they have since been paid any portion of it. So even those that voluntarily undertook the last domestic debt exchange program, their money has still not been given to them. So they took that medicine, but they have still not recovered. So if you were one of those, why will you go for another exchange debt program? Because what is going to happen is you will lose money under the debt exchange program, and the remaining money get left, you will not get it. Why will you lose money and not get the remaining? Now, when you might as well say, you know what, then just give me my money if you can. If you can't pay, just tell me you can't pay. Don't tell me to cut it down and you still cannot pay. The problem we are facing here, Sana, is that I suspect many of those who own that debt will look at it and may think twice, especially they say it's voluntary. They may not do it. And if they do not do it, we are still back to where we are. If government doesn't achieve this, the only reason government is getting aggressive on this now is that we need to collect that the 600 million, the next 600 million tranche from the 3 billion that the IMF has given us. And this is one of the conditions in the IMF deal, that we must do this debt exchange program of this cocoa debt as well before we get the next one sometime in September, October. And so the risk is that if people don't take it up, we won't get that 600 million. So expect that government will start issuing its threats as usual and see if it can get people to do it. But I'm not confident that this will be a success.
CONRAD, thank you very much for speaking to us.
You're welcome, Senna. Thank you.
CONRAD DUMBAH is an accounting and auditing professional based in the UK, speaking to us about this matter of exchange of cocoa